हिंदुस्तान का आखिरी ताजदार शहनशाह बहादुर शाह जफर।
Picture this. An 82-year-old man, frail, half-blind, sitting on a throne that no longer means anything. His empire, which once stretched from the mountains of Kashmir to the jungles of the Deccan, has been reduced to a few crumbling walls inside a fort in Delhi. He is surrounded by poets, not generals. His weapons are verses, not cannons. And yet, in a matter of hours, a tidal wave of armed soldiers will pour through his gates and declare him the Emperor of all India, the man who will lead the greatest uprising the British Empire has ever seen. He never asked for it, he never wanted it, and it would destroy everything he had left. This is the story of Bahadur Shah Zafar, the last emperor of a dynasty that ruled India for over 3 centuries, and what happened to him when the empire finally fell. It is a story about how the most powerful civilization in Asia was reduced to a pensioner living on British charity, how one desperate rebellion turned an old poet into a symbol of resistance, and how the British made sure that the final Mughal would die forgotten, buried in an unmarked grave thousands of miles from home in a country he had never even heard of. It is one of the most tragic stories in the history of empires, and the worst part is that almost nobody talks about it. To understand how Bahadur Shah Zafar ended up where he did, you need to understand just how far the Mughal Empire had fallen. Because this wasn't a sudden collapse. It was a slow, agonizing death that took about 150 years. At its height, the Mughal Empire was one of the largest and wealthiest empires on the planet. The first was Nadir Shah of Persia. In 1739, Nadir Shah invaded northern India, swept aside the Mughal army like it was made of paper, and sacked Delhi in one of the most brutal episodes in Indian history. His soldiers killed an estimated 20 to 30,000 civilians in a single day of massacre. And when he left, he took with him the legendary Peacock Throne, one of the greatest treasures ever created, along with the Koh-i-Noor diamond and an estimated 700 million rupees worth of gold and jewels. It was a humiliation from which the Mughal Empire never recovered. The emperor was left sitting on a wooden chair in a looted palace, ruling over a city of ashes. The second force, and ultimately the more consequential one, was the British East India Company. Now this is the part that feels almost absurd when you think about it carefully. The Mughals were not conquered by the British government. They were conquered by a private corporation. A trading company, originally chartered in 1600 to buy spices and textiles, gradually transformed itself into a military and political power. After the Battle of Plassey in 1757, the company took effective control of Bengal, the richest province in India. A few years later, after the Battle of Buxar in 1764, they forced the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II to sign over the right to collect taxes across Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. From that moment on, the emperor was technically employing the East India Company as his revenue collector. Everyone knew it, but the fiction of Mughal sovereignty was maintained because it suited the British. As long as the emperor existed as a symbolic figurehead, the company could claim legal legitimacy for its rule. After all, technically, they were still the emperor's servants. This was the world into which Bahadur Shah Zafar was born. He came into the world on the 24th of October, 1775, in the old city of Delhi, the son of Emperor Akbar Shah II and a Hindu Rajput mother named Lalbai. And from the very beginning, his path to the throne was anything but certain. He was not his father's favorite son. That distinction belonged to another prince, Mirza Jahangir, who was the preferred heir of his father's most influential wife, Mumtaz Begum. Court politics in the dying Mughal Empire were vicious, and succession was never straightforward. But fate intervened in an unexpected way. Mirza Jahangir, the favored prince, made a catastrophic mistake. In a fit of rage, he physically attacked the British resident at the Red Fort, a man named Archibald Seton. Now, assaulting the representative of the East India Company was not something you could walk away from, even if you were a Mughal prince. The British had Jahangir arrested and exiled, and with the preferred heir removed from the picture, the path to the throne opened up for Zafar. When his father Akbar Shah II died on the 28th of September, 1837, Bahadur Shah Zafar ascended to the Mughal throne at the age of 62. Think about that for a moment. He was already an old man by the standards of his time, and he was inheriting a title that carried no real power whatsoever. He was emperor of nothing. But here is what makes Zafar genuinely interesting, and what makes his story so much more than just a tale of political decline. Bahadur Shah Zafar was, by all accounts, a remarkable human being, not as a politician, not as a military commander, but as an artist, a thinker, and a patron of culture. He was one of the finest Urdu poets of the 19th century, writing under the pen name Zafar, which means victory, a name that would become painfully ironic as his life unfolded. His court in the Red Fort was the last great flowering of Mughal culture, a gathering place for some of the most brilliant literary minds in Indian history. The legendary poet Mirza Ghalib, whose verses are still recited across the subcontinent today, was a contemporary. The court poet Ibrahim Zawq was his personal teacher in the art of verse. Momin Khan Momin and Dag Delvi, two other towering figures of Urdu literature, frequented his darbars. Dag Delvi, two other towering figures of Urdu literature, frequented his darbars. The Red Fort under Zafar was not a center of political power. It was a center of intellectual and artistic life, one of the last great salons of Asian civilization. Zafar was also a devout Sufi mystic, a calligrapher of considerable skill, and by all accounts a gentle, thoughtful man. He was not cutthroat. He was not ambitious. He was not scheming. He was, in many ways, the exact opposite of what you would need to be in order to survive what was coming. They paint a picture of utter chaos. The sepoys were wild, exhilarated, and violent. They had just murdered their officers and marched through the night, and now they were inside the Mughal court demanding that the emperor endorse their revolt. Zafar, by most historical accounts, was reluctant. He knew the power of the East India Company. He understood that his own position was entirely dependent on their continued tolerance, and he was old enough to remember the stories of what Nadir Shah had done to Delhi over a century earlier. He knew what happened when great powers turned their attention to destruction. But the sepoys were not asking, they were telling, and there were thousands of them, armed, angry, and increasingly out of control. A rudimentary administration was established in Zafar's name. His sons, particularly Mirza Mughal, were given military commands. Proclamations were issued calling for the unity of Hindus and Muslims against the foreign rulers. And for a brief, chaotic, terrifying, exhilarating few months, Delhi became the epicenter of the largest armed uprising the British had ever. In September, the British forces breached the walls and fought their way into Delhi in a bloody street-by-street conquest that lasted nearly a week. The retribution was merciless. British soldiers and their Sikh and Gurkha allies massacred not just the rebel sepoys, but ordinary civilians. They looted homes. They destroyed mosques and temples. They burned neighborhoods. The cultural treasures of centuries, manuscripts, artworks, jewels, architecture were vandalized, stolen, or destroyed. Delhi, the glittering capital of the Mughal world, was turned into a charnel house. And in the middle of this inferno, the old emperor tried to escape. On the 20th of September, 1857, with British forces closing in, Bahadur Shah Zafar fled the Red Fort with his wife, Zinat Mahal, his remaining sons, and a handful of loyalists. They made their way to Humayun's tomb, the grand mausoleum of Zafar's ancestor, about 10 kilometers south of the Red Fort. It was there, hiding among the graves of his forefathers, that India's last emperor was found and captured. The man who found him was Major William Hodson, the leader of an irregular cavalry unit called Hodson's Horse. Hodson was a complex and controversial figure, a daring cavalryman, an intelligence officer who was also known for his ruthlessness and his questionable ethics. He surrounded Humayun's tomb with his troopers and sent word to the emperor that if he surrendered, his life would be spared. Zafar, exhausted, defeated, and with no remaining options, agreed. He handed over his arms, which reportedly included 2 magnificent swords, one engraved with the name of the Persian conqueror Nadir Shah, and the other bearing the seal of the Mughal Emperor Jahangir. Centuries of imperial power surrendered in a single moment. But the capture of Zafar was not the worst of it. What Hodson did next is one of the most infamous episodes of British colonial brutality in Indian history. The day after Zafar's arrest, Hodson went back to Humayun's tomb to demand the surrender of the emperor's sons, Mirza Mughal and Mirza Khizr Sultan, and his grandson, Mirza Abu Bakr. The princes, recognizing they had no chance of escape, agreed to come out. They were loaded into a bullock cart and escorted toward Delhi under guard. But when the procession reached a gateway known as the Delhi Gate, Hodson stopped the cart. According to multiple accounts, he ordered the princes to strip naked. Then, using his own revolver, he shot each of them one by one with 2 bullets to the heart. Right there in the road, in front of witnesses, in front of the crowd. The gateway where this happened came to be known as Kuni Darwaza, the Bloody Gate. It still stands in Delhi today. The severed heads of Zafar's sons and grandson were later brought before the old emperor. Some accounts say they were presented on a platter. The trial of Bahadur Shah Zafar began on the 27th of January 1858 inside the Diwan-i-Khas, a hall of private audience within the Red Fort itself. It was the very room where Mughal emperors had once received the homage of kings and ambassadors, where the peacock throne had stood before Nadir Shah carried it away. Now it served as a British military courtroom, and the man in the dock was the last emperor of a 300-year dynasty. The proceedings were, by any honest assessment, a show trial. The charges were severe. Zafar was accused of aiding and abetting the mutiny, of establishing sovereignty over Hindustan, of waging war against the British government, and of being an accessory to the murder of European Christians. The trial was conducted in English, a language the 82-year-old emperor could not understand. If Zafar remained anywhere in India, even in prison, he could become a focal point for future rebellions. His mere presence on Indian soil, his name, his bloodline, the weight of 3 centuries of Mughal history, all of it was too dangerous. He had to be removed entirely. taken to a place where no Indian could easily reach him, where his legend would fade, where the Mughal name would slowly be forgotten. They chose Rangoon, in British-controlled Burma, modern-day Yangon in Myanmar. It was far away, politically isolated and culturally alien. It was the perfect place to make an emperor disappear. On the 7th of October, 1858, at 4 in the morning, while Delhi still lay in darkness, Bahadur Shah Zafar, along with his wife Zinat Mahal and his 2 remaining sons, was loaded into bullock carts and escorted out of the city under armed guard. He was now being dragged across the ocean to a tropical country he knew nothing about, surrounded by people whose language he could not speak, in a climate utterly foreign to everything he had ever known. He was leaving behind not just his home, but his entire civilization, the mosques, the bazaars, the gardens, the tombs of his ancestors, the language of his poetry, the music of the streets, the call to prayer that had shaped the rhythm of his days, all of it gone. The conditions that awaited him in Rangoon were deliberately designed to strip away whatever remained of his dignity. The British authorities placed Zafar and his family under strict surveillance. They were confined to a small, dilapidated wooden house, with pen, paper, and ink. Think about that for a moment. A man whose entire identity was built around writing poetry, whose name literally means victory because of the verse he wrote under that pen name, was forbidden from putting words on paper. It was not just imprisonment, it was a systematic attempt to erase who he was. The public was not allowed to meet them. The servants who attended the family could visit only by obtaining a daily pass. Every aspect of their existence was monitored, controlled, and constrained. The message from the British was clear. This man is no longer an emperor. He is no longer a symbol. He is no longer anything at all. He is a relic being stored in a warehouse waiting to expire. And yet, even in this desolation, Zafar continued to write. Denied pen and paper, he is said to have used burnt sticks and pieces of charcoal to scratch verses onto the walls of his room. He composed ghazals, the classical form of Urdu love poetry, that are among the most heartbreaking in the language. His verses from exile are not about thrones or battles or political grievances. They are about longing, about loss, about the unbearable homesickness of a man who knows he will never see his beloved city again. One of his most famous couplets, which has been passed down through generations and is still recited across South Asia, captures his despair with devastating simplicity. He wrote about how unfortunate Zafar was, that for his burial, he could not even find 2 yards of ground in the land of his beloved. It is a verse that has become synonymous with exile, with displacement, with the experience of dying far from home. 4 years of his slow erasure passed. 4 years in the humid, alien landscape of Rangoon, thousands of miles from everything he had ever known, surrounded by guards and silence. His health, already fragile when he arrived, deteriorated steadily. He developed paralysis in his throat, which made it increasingly difficult for him to eat or drink. By October of 1862, his condition was critical. He could barely swallow and had to be fed broth with surgical arrangements. He ordered a collection of lime and bricks and selected a spot at the back of Zafar's enclosure for his burial. The British were not going to build a tomb. They were not going to hold a state funeral. They were going to put the last Mughal emperor in the ground and make sure nobody could find him. Bahadur Shah Zafar died on Friday, the 7th of November, 1862, at 5 in the morning. He was 87 years old. He was buried the same day, at 4 in the afternoon, at the rear of his enclosure near the Shwedagon Pagoda. The ceremony, if you can call it that, was attended by his 2 surviving children and a servant. His wife, Zinat Mahal, was not present. Captain Davies described the burial in clinical terms. The body was placed in a brick grave covered over with turf level with the ground. Deliberately, intentionally, the grave was made to be invisible. No headstone, no marker, no monument, no seven. The British grudgingly agreed to erect a single stone slab. The inscription was deliberately minimal and stripped of any royal dignity. It read simply, Bahadur Shah, ex-king of Delhi, died at Rangoon on November 7, 1862, and was buried near this spot. Not emperor, not sovereign, ex-king. And not even the precise spot, just near it. Even in death, even in the most basic act of commemoration, the British could not bring themselves to acknowledge who this man had been.